The man was sitting in an English garden full of flowers, bees, and tomato bushes, but this garden was not located in Devon or Kent. He was on the roof of London's Ham Yard Hotel, literally 2 minutes from the crazy bustle of Piccadilly Circus. He was an extremely handsome man, stately, with masculine features, about 5 feet 11 inches tall, about 180 centimeters, weighing 90 kilograms, fit and strong, with powerful forearms, reflexes like a Western rifleman, blonde hair in a high and tight cut, which hinted at a military background. The eyes are bright blue, the eyes of a person capable of overcoming difficulties. His eyes warmed when a dark-skinned woman sat down opposite him. She matched him in her extraordinary appearance. She is approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall, with luscious dark brown hair framing a beautiful oval face, huge brown eyes, a neat thin nose, and a full, sensual mouth. Otherwise, she was the Sultan's oriental dream, lush and erotic. The light trail of her perfume anticipated 101 nights of carnal pleasures. Her eyes sparkled with humor and warmth. She extended both hands, sitting down. It was a gesture of tenderness. They took each other's hands and, looking into each other's eyes, clearly demonstrated mutual love. This tender scene was captured by a large dragonfly hovering next to a mallow. But in fact, it was not an insect, but a micro-drone PD-100 Black Hornet. It was easy to mistake it for a real dragonfly because the body was painted to match it. The drone operator released it from his palm as he walked out onto the terrace. The HD video was broadcast to a digital repeater in his pocket, and from there it was transmitted via satellite to a nondescript building in Beltsville, Maryland. This building housed the Special Collection Service. The Special Collection Service is a joint classified project of the CIA and the NSA. When you get caught doing secret surveillance, especially in a friendly country or even in France, don't expect anything good because the locals get very angry. But this does not mean that we do not conduct surveillance. We just do it hidden. Therefore, SCS uses Mission Impossible technologies, and their arsenal is full of such insect drones. I joined the National Guard after leaving the Army. It seemed like a safe measure. My wife, Pia, thought that 1 weekend a month and a couple of weeks a year would do me good. According to her, playing soldier made me less aggressive. She was right, of course. I'm really too aggressive. This is why I sit in the gym so often. It's better to hit a punching bag than people. I involuntarily remembered the brutal murder of Pia. The man who seduced and killed her is now also in the grave. And I was partly annoyed. I wanted him to live a long and painful life, but this pathetic coward could not bear the punishment. But I did everything I could to avenge my murdered wife. After I paid him off, I went back to my lonely 10-hour days. Our office cooperates with federal agencies, providing local surveillance. One might ask, why would the National Counterterrorism Center hire undercover agents to surveil the people of the Windy City of Chicago? Because Cook County may have more potential jihadists than some Middle Eastern countries. And these are not dissatisfied brothers from the local ghettos. These are, as a rule, pampered majors who simply do not want to grow up. Most of them, of course, pretend to be radicals in order to shock their acquaintances and shock their parents. But there are also complete idiots among them who do not see the real picture. These are the ones we keep an eye on. I was sipping my morning coffee when a wonderful head of fiery red curls and a pair of gorgeous green eyes looked in the door. A low female voice rang out. "Chief, what mood are you in?" I laughed. "I haven't killed anyone. Yet. How can I help you, Kelly?" My partner is getting used to it. Kelly may be the hottest Celtic woman alive, at least since Lindsay Lohan ruined her lifestyle. Kelly's height is about 170 centimeters, weight 57 kilograms. She is all amazingly built and absolutely luxurious. Her voluminous copper-colored hair and large, cat-like eyes are a deep emerald shade, filled with typical Irish mischief. A long and narrow nose, a full mouth, concealing frank sensuality. She also has a special relationship with strength. She can hammer a nail with her tiny Beretta Nano, which she carries in a holster on the small of her back, just above her curvy ass. She is smart, quick on the street, not afraid of anything, and absolutely dedicated. We work together perfectly. We think alike, and there is mutual deep respect between us. Yes, I know that she loves me, but we do not and will not have a romantic relationship. Why do I not want to sleep with Miss Kelly McMahon, perhaps the most seductive agent since Mata Hari before the French shot her? Yes, because I don't want to ruin what we have now. Sex would introduce too many complications into our relationship. I realized this while investigating Pia's murder. The main evidence was the DNA of Pia's killer. Without it, the scoundrel would have escaped punishment. Theoretically, I could knock out the sample by force, which is closest to my spirit. But if I had cut him off in a fight, he would have realized that they were coming for him and would have hidden in a hole. I've reached a dead end. Then Kelly herself obtained the necessary sample, although she did this by sleeping with the suspect. Of course, I had to assume that she would use such a method after all. I saw how much I needed this sample, and for her it was just sex. But the knowledge that Kelly slept with this bastard made me wildly furious. I was more furious than at the moment when I discovered that my beloved wife had entered into an affair with the same guy. It opened my eyes to how deeply in love I am with Kelly McMahon. I have always been considered a sneaky guy who keeps everything under control and doesn't let anyone get to me. But Kelly killed me with one blow, and her action caused me unbearable pain, so much that I perceived it as a threat to my existence. So I did the only thing possible. I closed myself off from her completely. Before meeting Pia, it seemed to me that everyone around me wanted to cheat me. I was sure that Pia was the only one I could trust, loving, affectionate, smart. But she turned out to be too passionate, and her boss took advantage of this. Pia's betrayal was a strong blow, even for a thug like me. But I was not going to step on the same rake again. So Kelly and I now have the deepest friendship of partners without any sexual overtones. Never before have I had a friend, male or female, who was as close to me as Kelly. And this despite the fact that I was married to Pia. She was warm and loving, even too much as it turned out. But she didn't stand anywhere near Kelly as a life partner. Kelly is me, and I am her. Kelly gets excited when we have a new assignment, especially if it promises danger and violence. I wonder what exactly excited her now. She walked into the room, swaying her hips. She was wearing tight leggings, oh my God. Her ass, perfectly round and firm, just begged to have coins thrown at it. This is how my endurance is tested. No man will remain indifferent to Kelly, especially if she is in the mood. She sat down opposite me and coquettishly crossed her legs, knowing exactly what was driving me crazy. "Okay, what's on our agenda?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. She smiled slyly. "How do you like a trip to Europe at government expense? Free cheese only comes in a mousetrap. What's the catch?" She turned to close the door and showed off her figure as she did so. "Frank from NCTC called," she said. Frank was our curator. I asked, "And what does he need?" "He wants us to come to Washington for a conversation. He said that we need to meet in person. Here in Chicago, it's impossible." "I wonder what urgent matter is there?" Kelly's eyes had that familiar dashing gleam in them that I adore. "I'm sure there's a chest of gold waiting for us at the end of the rainbow. I'll handle the tickets." Billy Hughes Jr. lived a life of privilege. His father, Bill S.R., owned a large consulting firm in the vicinity of the Capitol, and his mother, Maddie, was a lawyer and also had a lot of money. But Maddie was not his natural mother. However, it was she who became the center of the universe and a guiding star for Billy. Her intelligence and wisdom inspired him to succeed. The strength of her love gave him the confidence to shine at the academy. After graduation, he completed combat training at Pensacola Air Force Base and then flew carrier missions throughout the Persian Gulf. He became famous as a hot pilot, which earned him a place in the Blue Angels, the U.S. Navy aerobatic team. Billy met his future wife, Susie, at a charity reception for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. The Blue Angels do PR for the Navy, and part of that PR is communicating with the public. So Billy and one of his bandmates were sitting at a table signing autographs. In the background was an F-18 with a striking blue and yellow livery. Billy looked up and met the most incredible cornflower blue eyes, which intricately combined naivety and sensuality. The girl smiled shyly and handed him a photo of him posing in front of his plane. I have to admit, in that photo, he really looked like a knight in shining armor. He gave her the most welcoming smile, but in truth, he usually smiled that way at everyone. This time, the smile was especially warm. After all, Susie Marshall was beauty personified. A flawless heart-shaped face framed by long blonde hair tied in a ponytail. A small, neat nose, big round eyes, and a mouth that screams, "Kiss me." She was wearing the same off-the-shoulder cowboy blouse that they wear in provincial towns. Above the elastic band of the top, the elastic hemispheres of her full breasts were visible. This time it was Billy himself who hesitated, dropping his pen. Before he could move, she bent over behind her, and his gaze revealed a graceful round bottom, even more tightly covered with jeans. He froze, not taking his eyes off her. The girl looked at him expectantly, and the line around him began to murmur louder and louder. He caught himself and signed. She said, "Thank you," and moved on. Billy's companion, the slot pilot, praised her with admiration. "Man, I wouldn't mind having one of these." Later, at the Make-A-Wish reception, Billy saw her again. He was in a summer white dress uniform, what is colloquially called a milkman. On his shoulder straps, the insignia of a lieutenant commander sparkled, and on his chest were the golden wings of a military pilot. The Air Operations Medal with the letter V for valor and 68 combat missions indicated that he had fought in war. The Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 silver stars hinted that he also flew in close support for the Marine Corps. Billy wasn't a big drinker. To control the F-18 as prescribed by the charter of the aerobatic team, you need to have a lightning-fast reaction, and for this, it is better to stay away from alcohol. Self-discipline came naturally to Billy. His mother drilled this into his head. He knew that Maddie loved him even more than her own daughters. A strange situation, because when Maddie Wilson appeared in the Hughes family, Billy was only 3 years old. He did not remember his own mother and did not want to remember. There were only 2 women in his life, his unsurpassed mother and his even more unique sister Chelsea. Maddie Hughes has instilled exceptional qualities in her children, and Billy's younger sister, Chelsea, outshone the beauty of Maddie herself. She was supposed to become the pearl of the family, an ideal debutante, whose appearance could open the way for her to high society. But fate decreed otherwise. She turned out to be a genius. Instead of getting married and following the well-trodden path of socialites, Chelsea disappeared into the dark depths of the internet. Nobody knew what she did, but there were rumors that she was a top-notch hacker. Chelsea adored Billy, so he was the one she contacted from time to time. Her brother knew that she was married to a mysterious man older than her and lived on the island of St. Lucia. It is unknown how they earn money, but they have a lot of money. Billy was performing his PR duties and was about to leave the reception when he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder. Turning around, he was almost speechless. If there is such a thing as destiny, it came in the form of Miss Susie Marshall. She wore a short, gold, tight Hervé Leger dress that showed off every curve of her figure. Susie is about 165 centimeters tall, but it seemed that she was all legs. Well, the rest of it was truly fascinating. The dress was held on by one strap, revealing fragile shoulders and the top of her ample chest. The fabric tightly outlined her wasp waist and emphasized her rounded buttocks. Billy stood spellbound. Susie said, "I wanted to thank you again for the autograph." But her eyes said that she wanted much more. He mumbled something in response, continuing to look at her, and the crowd had already begun to whisper. In the end, she made a saving move. "My dad is the sponsor of this event. Would you like to meet him?" Billy silently agreed, and she carefully took him by the arm and led him to a group of wealthy guests from Louisville. There stood a man who in Kentucky would be called Big Daddy, strongly built, heavyset, in a white suit, a la Colonel Sanders, with a black cord instead of a tie, the obvious host of the evening. He socialized with a group of influential people while sipping a mint julep. Susie, clinging to Billy so that her magnificent breasts tightly squeezed his hand, turned to the man. Daddy, I want to introduce you to Billy Hughes. We are very close. This was news to Billy. Pleasant, but unexpected. Dad turned and looked Billy over. He stood in his usual confident manner. Billy extended his hand. Pleased to meet you, sir. He immediately realized. The Blue Angels are in the city. My daughter grabbed onto the naval pilot. So this is one of them. He shook Billy's hand in a political manner with both hands and, trying to extract maximum prestige from the acquaintance, asked loudly, "What number do you have in your group, son?" Everyone turned around with interest. Billy blushed. "I'm flying solo, no. 5, sir. We are responsible for quiet flights and high angles of attack. The guys from the Diamond perform real aerobatics." Susie squealed happily. "We'll see you tomorrow, Daddy. I even have his autograph." Dad patted Billy on the shoulder in a friendly manner. "We're looking forward to tomorrow's show, son. Maybe you'll join us later to watch the fireworks from our VIP rooftop veranda." Susie squealed even louder and pressed herself closer to Billy, her ample breasts bouncing between them. "That would be great, Daddy. I will never leave this man behind." Well, military intelligence is, of course, an oxymoron. Maybe I'm cynical, but nothing surprises me anymore, and Washington officials every time only confirm my skepticism, sinking to new depths. When we think of intelligence, we think of patriotic people, and perhaps at the level of field agents and analysts this is true. But those who run the secret services are usually bureaucrats who are more concerned with covering their own ass and advancing their careers. The big picture for them is the portrait of the current president hanging behind them. That's exactly what Frank McCarthy was. Every time he meets Kelly, he looks at her hungrily. Some women might be outraged by this, but Kelly doesn't mind. She knows how to use it, and if he went too far, she would simply shoot him. Frank lounged in his chair a la Jabba the Hutt without the clatoon frogs. Kelly and I sat opposite. He shifted the folder with our documents, chuckled, not starting a conversation. Kelly, being the cheeky one she is, said, "Take your time, Frank. We have the whole day ahead of us." He growled something again, and then the door opened. Lieutenant General Burton Reynolds entered. His parents must have loved the Smokey and the Bandit movies to give him that name. Or they were simply not aware. The higher the ranks, the narrower the funnel through which you need to break through, which means you need to masterfully weave intrigues more suitable for the court of a Byzantine emperor than for the Pentagon. So most three-star generals are politicians in uniform. The plump Reynolds sitting in front of me was the embodiment of this truth. He spent his entire service in reconnaissance. He did not have the training of a field commander. But the 3 stars on his shoulders greatly flattered his pride, and he expected the same from those around him. Yes, 3 stars is a really important achievement, even if he got it after endless hardware games. He glanced, not without interest, at Kelly, who, of course, was sitting, emphasizing her figure favorably. Kelly met his gaze calmly. He turned to me. "I have a task for you, Major." I replied, "Ask the governor of Illinois. I serve in the National Guard." He retorted harshly, "You have just been called into active duty, Major. Here are your orders." I realized, damn, they assigned me a new time, and McCarthy pulled it all off. I asked the eternal question of any soldier who has been shoved up the ass of the world. "Why me?" Reynolds replied with a smug look. "Because we can," McCarthy added. The general needed a person without much fame for deep reconnaissance, but with the ability to call upon a contract. I told him that you are a first-class specialist, although you are a terribly impudent person and a pain in the ass. This means that you are the lucky one who will be fucked by harsh reality. I frowned. I don't go anywhere without my partner. I was sure that Kelly would have killed me herself if I had left her aside. Reynolds made a displeased face. I added ominously, "It's better if Kelly comes with me, otherwise I'll just resign and let everything go to hell." The general realized that there were no jokes and reluctantly squeezed out. "Okay, let him go if he passes the test." The task is very delicate. Turned to McCarthy. Yes, you were right, he really is a pain. After the morning show, where Billy brilliantly demonstrated his skills, he took a shower, put on a snow-white uniform, and went to the Marshall family home on River Drive, about 15 miles from the airfield. There, on the roof, there was a magnificent view of Ohio. Thanks to his mother, Billy had been used to social gatherings all his life, so he easily felt among beautiful people. But in a snow-white uniform with numerous awards, it's still not easy to go unnoticed. The guests were interested in him and whispered, "This is Susie Marshall's new boyfriend." It's funny because they only met once, and he was already considered her boyfriend. Soon Billy saw Susie on the makeshift dance floor. She danced with a guy who looked like Tom Cruise. Both looked very harmonious. Susie was glowing with joy and love for movement. She was wearing a little black dress, but the dress itself paled next to her figure. Her thick golden hair hung down to her shoulder blades. Her beautiful face simply beamed with happiness, and her figure was mesmerizing. The dress ended well above her knees, showing off her long, slender legs and emphasizing her bulging buttocks and slim waist. Susie's breasts were large and firm, and the deep neckline gave a glimpse into her charming cleavage. The music stopped, and she hugged Tom, smiling, pressing herself against him so that her large breasts were flattened against his chest. They kissed tenderly. She then turned and walked towards her father's group, holding hands with this guy. There was an obvious intimacy between them. It is clear that he is her lover. Billy felt bitter jealousy and resentment. Not wanting to show emotion, he quietly left the party and went to the Crown Plaza Hotel. About an hour later, the phone lit up. Susie. He didn't answer, but Susie called persistently. On the fifth call, he picked up. "Hello, Susie." There was concern in her voice. "Where have you gone? They told me that you were there, but suddenly left." Billy himself was confused in his feelings. He was hurt by the scene he saw, but pride and discipline did not allow him to admit jealousy, especially towards a girl he hardly knew. "Yes, I was there, but I saw that you were busy," he replied. "Actually, I came specifically to see you, but I didn't want to interfere. I'm leaving tomorrow at 7:30. There was silence on the line. Then Susie said quietly, "Can you explain something to me?" "It's late, Susie. I have to get up at 4:30. There were tears in her voice. "Please, it won't be long. I swear I'll leave no later than 10. Billy flew combat missions with only 3 hours of sleep, so it wasn't a matter of daily routine. The idea of letting a girl into the room at 10 in the evening was much more embarrassing. The Blue Angels didn't technically have a ban on guests, but Billy was old school in terms of decorum. But what embarrassed him even more was that he suddenly realized Susie Marshall was not at all indifferent to him, so he answered carefully. "Okay, number 146. There was a knock on the door almost instantly. He opened it, completely bewildered. Susie stood in front of him in that same little black dress. With mascara smeared on her cheeks, she looked like a wet kitten. Sobbing, she threw herself on his neck and pressed her face to his chest. Billy took a step back, and the door slammed shut. He stood hugging a crying woman, and his first thoughts were whether she would stain his snow-white shirt with makeup. She raised her tear-stained face and sobbed. "I'm sorry." He took her to the table. She sat up, looking into his eyes. "Sorry for what?" he asked in bewilderment. "You saw me dancing with Chip, right? If Chip is that pumped-up, handsome guy about 2 meters tall, then yes." Susie winced painfully. "He is my fiancé, or rather, he was." Billy felt that the situation was completely illogical. Susie looked at him pleadingly. "I don't understand what's happening to me. I'm usually a reasonable person, but ever since I saw you, it was like being struck by lightning. I love you." She looked into his eyes in despair. "From our first meeting, I know that you are the only man for me. I confessed everything to Chip. He didn't like it, and neither did Dad. But I am confident in my decision." With these words, Susie stood up, straightened her dress, and said quietly, with deep feminine confidence, "So it's all yours if you want it." Billy was speechless. He came to Louisville as a 28-year-old single naval aviator, completely dedicated to the service. But this girl stood in front of him, personifying all his male dreams: beauty, intelligence, passion, spiritual depth. The problem is that of the entire aerobatic team, Billy had the least sexual experience. At the academy and after it, he had affairs with some socialites, but everything went without any frills. He looked confused as Susie approached. He suddenly realized what she was going to do and became tense. Billy did not believe in the reality of what was happening. This golden goddess had just given him more pleasure than he had ever experienced, and now she stood completely naked, inches away from him. Bill had a body carved from stone. Chip was a few inches taller, but there was no way he could radiate the same energy as Billy. Chip was a businessman, 10 years older and soft from too many business lunches. Billy's shoulders and chest were the ideal masculine athletic build. Incredibly strong, but not intimidating, with pleasant vegetation, but without a carpet. His pecs and deltoids were large and well-defined from working the helm in a 3G environment. His legs were like the marble columns of a Greek god, but she was even more affected by the precision of his movements. Every movement was controlled and precise, and it drove her crazy with sexual desire. Billy had never encountered a woman like Susie. During his school and academic years, he had several girls, but they all belonged to the same privileged circle, and there, restraint and caution were important, at least for decent girls. No one he had known before came close to the primitive, bestial approach to sex that Susie demonstrated. Her eyes widened, a little confused, as if she was really returning from the other world. She tried to focus for a few seconds, and then her full lips spread into a joyful smile, and she said, "It was the most amazing experience of my life. I will never let you go." And she never let go. They corresponded a little more while she took care of her business in Louisville. Among other things, she officially broke off the engagement. Dad was unhappy, but she didn't care. She found the man of her dreams. From Susie's point of view, the sooner they get married, the better. The next month, Susie joined Billy in Pensacola, and they were married. Both should have been wary that their courtship was too rapid. Perhaps Billy should have paid more attention to the impetuous nature of his future wife. But none of that mattered. They were in love. The briefing was short and to the point. Reynolds handed us over to one of his assistants. He took us to a room with tempest shielding. Since there was security equipment, the information was important, and since some petty clerk informed us, it means we were all expendable. This is called plausible deniability. The target of the investigation was a guy with whom I would gladly have a beer. Although he is a squid, as sailors are called disparagingly, there was nothing suspicious about him at first glance. However, if Hughes personally was not of particular interest, then his younger sister certainly was. And all because there was circumstantial evidence indicating that she could be a member of the Red Dragon Group, one of the most terrible hacker associations in the world. At the same time, she and her husband lived outside the jurisdiction of the United States, which was clearly no coincidence. The rest of the family had connections and influence. His mother is a prominent lawyer in Washington and a friend of half the Congress. One aunt is a senior partner in one of the Big Four and controls large sectors of the economy. The other aunt is half saint, half world traveling doctor. I finally interrupted this nerd who was giving a briefing. "So far, you haven't shown me anything significant. He may have a black sheep in his family, but this guy is a hero. Why the hell are you wasting taxpayers' money on such flimsy arguments?" The bespectacled boy replied, "We have something else for you." And then he presented information on the Esfahan family. The daughter, Samreen, is the one Hughes has a crush on, and I understand him. If I weren't bound by my platonic but lifelong relationship with Kelly McMahon, I would definitely have a crush on Samreen Esfahan myself. She was the epitome of sexuality with an exotic Persian twist hot like the dashed caviar desert in Iran. At first glance, she was completely innocent. But McCarthy claimed that she was collaborating with the Iranian intelligence ministry, known in narrow circles as Baha. There is no direct evidence of this, but her father Jahangir and brothers Rahim and Bahadur held high positions in the Revolutionary Guard. Plus, the mother was once an agent in the old Vivek intelligence agency, so the family was what we needed. The whole story began with Hughes being spotted by a network of street cameras in London. Hughes was important enough to be kept an eye on, and the material was passed on to a CIA operative once it became clear that he and Miss Esfahan were in a more serious relationship than usual. Our task is to find out whether Commander Hughes fits the CIA's head bag. Why were two Chicago detectives sent to this case? After all, everything happens in London, not in Chicago. The answer is clear. We need people with a legend who can be leaked without any problems, and we just turned up. If you are a government agency, you cannot simply frame one of your citizens. You will immediately lose your moral superiority. Instead, you pretend to conduct a thorough investigation, then the analyst interprets the results. And then you do with the person everything that you originally intended. The CIA task force has already been burned by Ames, Hansen, and Snowden, and now wants to make Hughes a poster child. That's how it works. It's all a matter of optics and clever distraction. How do I know this? Yes, because he himself was involved in such matters for many years, first in the military police and then as an analyst. So it was clear. Hughes had crossed the path of someone very influential, and this someone was preparing a luxurious setup. The only mystery is why Hughes. This was the only incentive to figure it out. After serving with the Angels, Billy was transferred to VT-21 flight school at Kingsville AFB. He worked as an instructor and flew training T-45 Goshawks, not F-18s. But to his surprise, Billy discovered that he really enjoyed guiding young cadets along the path from recruit to naval aviator. Meanwhile, Susie became a star at the airbase. She shone at all events. Billy was proud of his beautiful wife, and she was glad that she married the best instructor at the base. Billy's academic achievements and service to the Blue Angels were widely admired. With one exception, Captain Dirk Bennett. Bennett was Billy's commander and also the son of Admiral Lindsay Bennett. He was quite possibly a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but Dirk himself was furious when it was hinted to him that his career was the result of his father's patronage. Dirk Bennett was a large and stately man, prone to being overweight. He grew up as a star in everything, the best in any business, the universal prince, and then Billy was under his command, a man who eclipsed Dirk in everything. And without any visible effort, he was a born pilot and leader. Bennett himself did not fly very successfully. With a height of 1 meter and 93 and a weight of over 100 kilograms, he was not allowed into fighter aircraft, only on patrol propellers. He served on the P-3 Orion, and although hunting for submarines is an extremely important task, Bennett himself was offended to spend his whole life hanging around at speeds of 400 knots, while the fighters were flying rapidly. And now you also have to command the most noble of fighters and a man like Hughes. Dirk Bennett saw in everything Billy did the intention to steal the glory that supposedly should rightfully go to him, Dirk. And he was angry. Bennett was also jealous of what a stunning goddess Billy's wife was. Bennett himself had a nice wife, Julia, who came from good society in Austin. She was pretty, but she didn't have the dream breasts that Dirk thought an alpha male's wife should have. Therefore, Bennett desperately wanted to get Susie Hughes. Bennett was cunning. He felt that Susie had a fatal weakness. She was drawn to collecting men to feed her self-esteem. She was also incredibly impulsive, and Dirk skillfully took advantage of this. He rubbed shoulders with Susie at all the parties, showering him with compliments. How much he appreciated Billy, how much he cared about his career. Thus, Bennett inspired Susie with two things: that he was Bennett, an important person in the fate of her husband, and that he could be completely trusted. Dirk was an alpha male, and his pronounced masculinity might have scared off some modest girls, but for the sexually sophisticated Susie, it acted like catnip. They carried on the usual light flirting without direct border crossings, but something more intimate gradually formed. The part of Susie that loved to hunt men for self-affirmation revealed the thought of having a powerful man in her collection. And since he is special, it's easier to get close to him. Bennett needed to get Billy out of the way. He ordered him to represent the Kingsville base in Washington almost every week. Billy saw this as an opportunity to have more contact with senior officials, and Susie was glad that this would help her husband advance in his career. Billy left for 4 days, and Dirk stayed and gradually crept up. Bennett understood that Susie saw him as prey and was physically attracted to him, although without any intention of acting on it. But she was very sensual, and Dirk knew that only the right situation was necessary. This situation presented itself at the annual military ball. The women wore the most luxurious evening dresses. The men came out in full dress uniform, everyone except Billy. Bennett specifically sent him to Washington. Billy complied, but was upset. Susie raged. "This is the most important social event of the year. I'm hosting it. Maybe ask them to come a couple of days later." Billy grinned. "That's not how it works. If I tell my bosses that I can't attend a meeting because of my wife's ball, they will doubt my loyalty." Susie knew he was right, but she was angry. Maybe that's why she drank more than usual on the night of the ball. Bennett came with his wife Julia, a sweet girl with an impeccable reputation. In a little black dress, she looked like an elegant string quartet, elegant and modest. Susie was like a brass band, the booming march of the Texas M University. 2 words, shock and awe, best described the effect her sight had. But Bennett didn't drool over those gorgeous breasts. He gallantly took Susie by both hands, without taking his eyes off her, and said, "It's a pity that Billy doesn't see what an unusually beautiful wife he has." Susie literally melted, answering with feeling. "Thank you, Dirk. This is so important to me." He squeezed her hands and, together with his wife, moved on. He saw that Susie was angry and hurt, and that she was an easy target. Susie was busy all night with organizational matters, but Bennett kept coming over to refresh her cocktail. She was drinking vodka and tonic, which is a mild drink unless it's 153 proof vodka. Dirk loved to plan the seduction in detail. By the end of the evening, Susie was drunk as hell. She was ashamed. She wanted to disappear from sight before she did something stupid. And the only person she trusted was her friend Dirk. Of course, he offered to give her a ride home. "I could take my wife with me, but why? Julia is used to her husband always looking for adventure. I'll go with someone else," she said. When they pulled up to Susie's house, she leaned back against the door of his Escalade. The dress rode up to her buttocks, revealing her flawless thighs. Her legs were spread wide open, and her black thong was on display, just like on display. Bennett parked to the side. "You shouldn't park your car right in front of Hughes' house." He helped her out, and she immediately got down on all fours and vomited everything onto the lawn. The dress was now hiked up above her waist, exposing her deliciously rounded ass to his gaze. He was already looking forward to it. He pulled her to her feet, and she muttered something about shame. He led her to the entrance, tottering on her 4-inch heels. "Where are your keys, dear?" "Under the pot," she mumbled. He sat her down on the swing by the door, found the key under the flower pot, and opened the door just as Susie started to slide off the swing. He picked her up and carried her inside, holding her close to him so that her huge breasts pressed into his chest. Her head fell back and her body went limp in his arms as they walked into the bedroom. There he took her chin and kissed her. Gradually it dawned on her brain that she was being kissed. She didn't understand who it was, but that didn't matter. Her automatic reaction is sex. Susie was made for sex, and desire overwhelmed her. She didn't realize who exactly she was doing this with, and didn't think about stupid things like adultery. Her consciousness narrowed. She needed to have sex urgently. She woke up from the bright sun shining directly through the loosely drawn curtains. My head was pounding. How did she get so drunk? And suddenly she remembered, Billy is in Washington. Then who is hugging her now? She turned around and saw Dirk Bennett. He was completely naked, and so was she. So it was he who had sex with her at night. The enormity of what had happened dawned on her. She jumped up. Bennett sat on the bed with a satisfied smile. And I thought we were just friends. And I didn't know that everything was much deeper. Now it was necessary to convince her that it was all her initiative. Susie moaned. God, how could we? We both have families, Bennett sympathetically. But you attacked me like that at night. I wanted to take you away so that no one would see your condition, and then I couldn't resist your stunningly beautiful. It was a blatant lie, but Susie bought it because in her opinion she really is irresistible. So she slept with Dirk out of anger at Billy, or because Dirk is her friend. She was too drunk and confused. I'm so sorry, Dirk. I don't know how I got into this. I swear this won't happen again. Bennett gave her a falsely friendly smile. He needed her to believe that it was nothing, and that he would keep everything a secret. It's okay, dear. No one knows anything except the two of us. Let's leave this as our common secret. This was the decisive moment. If Susie agrees to hush up the matter, then she's on the hook. And he added, although I admit it was the best sex of my life. He flattered her so that she would feel flattered rather than guilty. Then she will not go into moral aspects. Bennett patted the mattress. I still have time. Let's do it again when you're sober. I'm sure you can shock me even more. Now everything was finally decided. If she said yes, he got her. If no, then he would leave. Susie hesitated for a moment. It seemed to her that he was questioning her sexual abilities, but she knew that there was simply no one better than her. And since she has already come so far, she is used to not denying herself anything. She knew how to come up with excuses, like, no one will know, no one will get hurt. Deep in her soul, she understood that this was self-deception, but she wanted it. This means that everything went wrong right in Hughes' house. They managed to sleep 2 more times before Dirk returned to his family. Billy was increasingly sent to Washington. He hated leaving Susie for too long, but he was a team player. He had to fly from Kingsville to Corpus Christi, and from there to the capital. The meetings were mostly formal, so he could have returned in one day, but Captain Bennett wanted him to see other people. The boss said it was more profitable financially. As a result, Billy was usually away for 4 days at a time. On one of these visits, Billy once went to a Taco Bell in the very center of the Pentagon. Yes, there really is a Taco Bell there. He was finishing a burrito of dubious origin when he heard a joyful cry. Billy. He turned around and saw his former commander with the Blue Angels, Admiral Wilbur Rosen. He was now a 1-star rear admiral on Navar headquarters. Rosen perked up. What are you doing in Washington? I thought you were the head instructor at Kingsville, Billy replied. I don't think I'm the in-charge there, but yes, I'm in Kingsville now. I'm coming here as a liaison officer, and tomorrow morning I'm flying home. At this point, it was as if a light bulb went on for Rosen. Why do you need a commercial flight? I think we can help each other. It turned out that Rosen had a problem. He needed to move the T-45 Goshawk from the Patuxent River base to Kingsville, but there was no one to entrust it with, and Billy just needed to go to Kingsville. Comfortable. Billy was happy. He loved to fly, and now he could get home earlier, and flying by yourself is a pleasure. The only negative, he left the car at the Corpus Christi airport, so he will have to take a taxi after landing. As a result, he returned home only at 3 o'clock in the morning. He entered the house quietly so as not to wake Susie and decided to spend the night in the guest bedroom. He chuckled, anticipating her surprise in the morning when she would find him cooking breakfast. He could not even imagine how much she would be surprised now. He was awakened by his wife's scream. Billy, like any pilot, woke up instantly, fully aware of where he was. The scream was terrifying, and he rushed upstairs to the master bedroom. There his life ended. Billy was a military pilot, honed in on instant reactions. He knew he'd need irrefutable proof, so he grabbed his phone from his jeans pocket and turned on the camera. He will deal with the mental pain later. She suddenly realized who was standing at the door. Her eyes widened, and she squealed. Oh no, Billy, Bennett slowly realized what was happening and spun around to see Billy with the phone. He understood that if the recording became public, his career would end. Bennett rushed towards Billy, shouting, "Here, give it back immediately." Billy dodged, continuing to film. "Sorry, Dirk, but I need this for your Article 134 case." Bennett roared, but now it was a roar of fear. There was a fight, rumble and silence. Billy thought, "Lord, if only I didn't kill him." Continuing to film, he looked out onto the stairs and saw that Bennett was alive below. Billy stopped the recording and dialed 911. He then immediately sent the video to the cloud. It was his typical prudence and concentration. He always did everything according to the instructions, which his mother taught him. Then he returned to his wife. She lay on her stomach, sobbing and pounding the mattress with her fists. Billy wasn't a robot. He was simply accustomed to stress and cold determination. He was taught to act first and then suffer the consequences. And yet, sooner or later the pain will come. But now the main thing needed to be done. A few minutes later, an ambulance and a patrol car arrived. Paramedics took Bennett away, naked. One of the nurses covered him with a blanket. Yes, he really does have an impressive farm. Billy told the police everything, showed the video, including the moment where Bennett attacks first, and he himself simply defends himself. The officers had seen this hundreds of times and looked bored. "We will need an official statement, but you don't have to rush. Everything is clear here." Then Billy went upstairs for one last, painful conversation. Susie was still lying naked, burying her face in the pillow and sobbing. He said sharply, "You didn't expect me to arrive earlier, did you?" She frantically pulled the sheet to her chest. It was funny. She had just been naked, and she began to sob. "God, Billy, I'm so sorry," he asked. "How long does this last?" She looked hauntedly. "Is it important? I didn't mean to do that. I love only you. Please forgive me. I promise this will never happen again." Billy stood there, gritting his teeth. "Important. Bennett is my commander. If he specifically sent me away to sleep with my wife, that will be included in the proceedings. Tell me now or tell the adjutant general, but you have to tell." Susie began to sob even harder. From that ball itself. He said it was just fun and that no one would get hurt. Billy figured. So it's been 8 months already. God, what an idiot I am. Susie started a broken record. It was only physical. It didn't change anything in our relationship. "I love only you. We can handle it. I promise, never again with anyone." She began to get out of bed, apparently thinking that she could seduce him. "It only happens when you aren't there. I couldn't even imagine that you would find out. I would never hurt us. Let me make amends in bed." Billy glanced at her. 3 years of love disappeared without a trace. The opposite of love is not hatred, but indifference. Billy didn't feel anything anymore. No pain, no anger, just emptiness. He said coldly, "I don't want to touch you. I loved and trusted you." Susie froze, as if in disbelief. Then it dawned on her that he didn't want her. Impossible. Every man wanted her. How then can you get him back if he doesn't crave her? Finally, it dawned on Susie Hughes that she was in serious trouble. Billy was a man of honor. He never broke his promises. For him, betraying Susie was the worst possible betrayal. This drove him crazy with rage, but many years of service forged in him unshakable self-discipline. Billy never reacted emotionally. It was the same trait that made him so effective in battle. He made life and death decisions every day in Afghanistan, and this was just another one of those. Billy knew that his next actions would determine the direction of his life. So he stopped and asked himself what he was doing. "In fact, I want out of this situation." The answer came immediately. "I want to rebuild my life without this woman," he said calmly. "It's all over between us. It's not about trust or male ego. I simply cannot live with a man who has no honor, and you lost yours the very moment you desecrated our marriage." Susie seemed about to say something, so he quickly added, "I don't care about all your excuses. You did the wrong thing, and you knew it, but you did it anyway, and this is an indisputable fact." Susie looked desperate. She said pleadingly, "Billy, please, give me one more chance. I can't imagine life without you." Billy answered gloomily, "Honestly, I myself can't imagine life without you. But sometimes you have to do hard things if you want to maintain your self-respect." He added quietly, as if speaking to himself, "I would lose all self-respect if I continued this marriage. Life is full of pain and suffering. This happens to everyone. Successful people know how to deal with this. So I'll let it drag me down the well of self-pity. I grew stronger than that. My parents instilled this in me." Susie sank to the bedroom floor, crying. Billy looked at her with mixed feelings. Anyone would experience something similar if they loved someone for a long time. But Billy was someone who was used to facing reality. He said softly, "I'll move to the barracks on base until the divorce is finalized. I'll be honest, but nothing more. You know my family, especially my mother and my Aunt Mary, so it's better not to even try to argue with this. They will bury you and your dad in the ground." With these words, he grabbed the alarm bag and walked out of Susie's life forever. That same night, Kelly and I boarded a plane at BWI Baltimore, Washington, and flew to Heathrow. We didn't tell anyone about this, although, however, no one cared about us. We were merely the designated guide goats. I had pre-booked a long-term apartment in Mayfair, $300 a night, with a private bedroom and a pull-out sofa to sleep on. I didn't want to tempt fate by sleeping in the same bed as Kelly. It wasn't Claridge's or Cavendish, of course, but we were on a business trip, so concerns were associated with Esfahan. So the next day, I wandered down Bruton Street in the pouring rain, looking for her office. I was expecting something Victorian style. After all, she has a PhD from Cambridge, and the place is not far from Berkeley Square. But at the indicated address, it turned out to be a modern building. The rain was pouring down in buckets. I was hiding in a doorway on the other side of the street. Finally, she rushed out of her office door and ran to a pub some distance away. I waited for the right moment and followed. The rain was still pouring down, so I turned up my collar and pulled my hat down. Thank God. Isfahan and Hughes sat near the entrance. I was glad that I immediately saw them both together. This simplified the task of blue-bugging, installing spyware on their phones via Bluetooth. Of course, this is completely illegal, but the result is important to me, not the law. Laws are just a guideline to help you understand exactly where to bypass them. Isfahan's phone was in Bluetooth visibility mode, so she was completely defenseless. The fact that she is walking around with information open to everyone already indicates that Miss Esfahan is most likely not threatening national security, but we had to prove it. Hughes' phone was more difficult. He had a hidden mode, had to use Blue Sniffer to access its 2.4 gigahertz port. Then I dropped the same malware there as I had on his girlfriend's phone. All this happened in their pockets while they enjoyed sandwiches and white wine. I stood up and walked back out into the rain, trying not to let them see my face. Now we could listen to and record all their conversations, calls, and even use the camera on their phones. We watched Hughes and Esfahan for a month. It was clear that they were just two lovers, and they did not do anything else. Esfahan seemed to be avoiding his family, and Hughes seemed completely professional, except for the moments when he was with her. And in her company, he behaved like a boy in love. I understood him. Esfahan was very beautiful and smart. It became increasingly clear that Kelly and I were just the cat's paw in some complex personal game, with the main puppeteer trying to maintain anonymity. At some level of federal agency, there are no consequences if no one knows who pushed the button, so the nameless people have the life and death of the rest in their hands. Lord Acton was right when he said, "All power corrupts, but anonymity corrupts just as much." In the bureaucratic mechanism, powerful and confusingly complex, any official who abuses his power can easily get lost. Seriously, why have henchmen if you can't use them to settle scores with offenders? Nobody plans road rage, but sometimes the other driver really gets the ball rolling. Now imagine that driver has a Fiat 500 and you have an Abrams. It would be completely human to just crush the bastard. You might have to answer this, if people would know that you did it. But the beauty of being an anonymous cog in an impersonal system is that you can drive away, whistling, "Another one bites the dust," confident that you just got another bad driver off the road. Participation in this whole dirty business corrodes the soul. Perhaps that's why I became so callous. But even an inveterate cynic like me has his limits, and what we were preparing against Billy Hughes disgusted me. My inner spidey sensors told me that I had reached the edge, and a strange feeling arose within me. For the first time in my life, I wanted to correct an act, not a smart one. And that certainly didn't include framing Hughes. I told Kelly. I made a decision. She looked at me with great interest. I'm going to go underground. These two are clearly being set up, and I'm determined to find out who's behind all this crap. And when I find out, I'll bring this whole stinking scheme to light. Maybe I'll wash at least part of my soul this way. I added tenderly, I'll have to come out of the shadows, and this will most likely be a violation of both our contract and the law. We might get stuck up to our ears, so if you want to jump off now, I'll understand, no offense. Only a complete idiot like me would dare to oppose the entire US government. Kelly looked. In a low voice, she said, "Yes, you know how to excite women, right?" I thought, why haven't I made this woman mine yet? And said, "It's time to talk to our target. You need to know the background. There must be an obvious reason why they want to prosecute him for treason." In addition to her beauty and intelligence, Kelly has the gift of persuasion that can inspire confidence in anyone. Hughes and Esfahan were very smart people. I'm a typical thug, but Kelly has a PhD in forensic psychiatry from the University of Chicago. So the first thing she did was make contact. The real Kelly is like lightning in a bottle, but she has a chameleon-like ability to change her facial expression and demeanor to take on the desired image. In this role, she did not show a drop of the predatory grace or athletic strength that she possesses in reality. She seemed very civilized. I watched as she smiled politely and introduced herself. At the first moment, Hughes and Esfahan visibly tensed. This was visible in their body language, and I understand them. But Kelly continued to speak calmly, and soon they were looking at her with curiosity. She handed them a business card, then turned and left the restaurant. Most likely, the London camera system recorded her as soon as she stepped outside, and the people to whom we actually declared war watched all this from the other side of the lens. So Kelly played the classic find the queen hand. The point is to make the pursuers watch the wrong object. It was Kelly who made contact, and they were now following her. She changed 4 metro stations and took 2 lines before returning to our apartment. All this confusion was precisely what was needed so that they would not fall behind. And at home, she calmly relaxed, knowing that she had completed the task. Meanwhile, I proceeded through Berkeley Square, then along Bruton Lane to Coach Horses, where I first noticed Hughes and Esfahan, and then returned to Bruton Street. I was waiting for the couple in love outside Dr. Isfahan's office. Hughes and Esfahan walked down the street holding hands. They looked very nice. I came out of the shadows. It was clear from their gestures that they did not want to have anything to do with me, and I don't blame them. With a height of 1 meter and 80 and a weight of 100 kilograms, I really look like a gorilla. I said as politely as possible, "Dr. Esfahan, Commander Hughes, we need to talk." Hughes replied, "Your partner said that you have something important." Here he smiled friendly and added, "She also noted that, although you look like the missing link in evolution, you are safe." I smiled back. "You can consider me a teddy bear. True, I am a little big in size." They laughed and the tension dissipated. I said with a clear hint, "But we can't chat here on the street," and pointed towards the surveillance camera at the end of the block. Dr. Esfahan spoke quietly in her noble voice. "Please, let's go up to my office." I knew from eavesdropping that she could, if she wanted, give her Oxford accent an almost sensual quality. The lady was simply charming. When we were all settled indoors, away from prying eyes, I looked straight at Hughes and said, I know this is all sudden and sounds crazy, but believe me, Kelly and I were hired by the Pentagon to frame you for treason. I added, trying to emphasize the significance of what was said. It seems that someone you know wants to ambush you. Hughes reacted surprisingly calmly. I only noticed how the muscles of his jaw tensed. I thought, well done, and he continued. I don't know why or who is behind this, but Kelly and I decided to help you. Perhaps together we can get to the bottom of the truth, I said seriously. Is there anyone in the government who would like to see you in an orange robe at the Attic's Florence prison? I thought he would either be confused, angry, or scared. Supermax is a scary thing. But he simply said in a calm voice, I know someone who might want this. And he told me a classic story of betrayal. In my 25 years of working in military police and private investigation, I have seen thousands of similar stories. The wife gets involved with some trickster, and in the end, the fact of betrayal is always revealed. For if people sleep with each other, it will always be discovered sooner or later. But in this case, the cheater slept with Hughes' commander, and Hughes had irrefutable evidence. Not only that, this commander abused his position to get Hughes out of the way. The result was Article 134 of the Uten's Code of Military Justice and the Tribunal. The Dodger was demoted from the rank of captain to lieutenant commander, one step below Hughes. Then they fired me with an unsatisfactory performance, which is, in fact, a shameful mark on my personal file, precluding normal work in the future, except perhaps delivering garbage. If it weren't for Dad, he was a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The father got his son a job in a private company, expecting services in return. That's how everyone works here. Hand washes hand among Washington bandits. Thus, the circle of suspects included at least the father himself, the son himself, plus a third party, the same unfaithful wife whom Hughes sent in stages to her father, and even without any concessions in the divorce proceedings. And the harlot's dad is a big figure in the Kentucky delegation. He was clearly not happy that his daughter returned spoiled. So there could well have been a political connection. Bottom line, Hughes is up to his neck in feuds with very influential people. I said, before we begin our own investigation, we need some information. But I have no idea how to get them. Esfahan said bitterly, if it can help you, my love, I'm ready to leave. I don't want you to have problems with the government. I looked at her and said directly, don't give up so easily, baby. You are now collateral damage, and if everything goes according to the customer's plan, the British will simply deport you to Iran. Then I added, perhaps too crudely, you're not a sleeper agent of the Ministry of Information, Vaja, are you? It is known who your father and brothers are and what your mother worked for. It is this version that the right people are now trying to promote. Esfahan turned pale. Her face is so beautiful and her gaze is so intelligent that you forget that inside she is an ordinary person. Although Kelly, of course, is not ordinary at all. Esfahan seemed ready to explode. She exclaimed, my family are Shiites, yes, they are supporters of Aga Tehrani, but I myself have no religion other than humanism. I never wouldn't do harm to anyone. Their views are cold and heartless, but I am a doctor. I treat people, not maim. It sounded sincere, and I trusted my intuition. This woman really wasn't a threat. What you see is what it is. Hughes said, only one person has access to classified information, my sister. I knew about his sister, the one involved in the Red Dragon Revolution. Hughes chuckled. Chelsea, and there is Red Dragon Revolution, only she is alone. I was amazed. So one woman is behind one of the most powerful hacker groups on the darknet. He smiled. If it concerns computers, Chelsea can find all. 5 days later, Kelly and I arrived after a 16-hour flight to the tropical island of Martinique. We reported to McCarthy that everything was calm in London, but we allegedly dug up secret bank accounts in the Caribbean and now intend to check them. In fact, it was a distraction. It seems that McCarthy was delighted by this news because he knew that the entire investigation was a fiction. If Hughes had really been planning something illegal, It would have been much easier to fabricate a case against him. McCarthy took the bait on our legend. At the pier of Fort de France, the elegant 60-foot yacht Cantius was waiting for us. It was a luxury boat. Its owner clearly had a lot of money. There was an elderly man at the helm, and his daughter met us on board. She looked tiny compared to Kelly, no more than 150 centimeters tall and weighing 45 kilograms. At the same time, she was simply stunningly beautiful. She had very thick brown hair cut into a pixie cut. This haircut emphasized the perfection of her flawless face, and her eyes were a striking jade green color. Kelly's eyes are closer to an emerald shade, reflecting the essence of the Irish soul, and this girl had a rather cat-like look. She was wearing a simple hoodie and short yacht shorts. Her legs were amazing, slender, perfectly shaped, and moderately muscular. The round ass matched Kelly's curves. With such an appearance, one would expect her to radiate sexuality, but above all, she exuded self-confidence and an almost frightening composure. She looked at me with a direct, appraising gaze. It was slightly disorienting. I've already seen this look on special people, so I guessed. "You must be Chelsea, Billy's sister." Chelsea Hughes Meissner turned out to be a strange combination of phenomenal intelligence and cold-blooded determination. She was one of the most awe-inspiring people I have ever met. She said, "Yes, I'm Chelsea, and this is my husband Tom." So that man was not a father, but a husband. Everything is clear. In order to feel comfortable next to such a woman, a man needs absolute self-confidence. It's hard for me to imagine that someone her age would hold on firmly enough, but an older person could very well. Next to Chelsea stood a small copy of her, a girl of about 7, just as fragile, and with the same brown hair and dark skin, and also with these incredible jade eyes. The little girl took a graceful step forward, extended her hand, and said, "My name is Brooklyn. Welcome to our ship." I thought, what 7-year-old girl calls a yacht a ship? I submitted. "This is my partner, Kelly McMahon." Kelly and Chelsea, as women do, quickly began to scan each other. Women are like cats. It was clear that Chelsea was smarter than almost anyone, but Kelly was not inferior to her in the ability to navigate the real world. Plus, she was armed. So it turned out to be an interesting confrontation. I later learned that Chelsea Hughes Meissner is indeed capable of changing the reality around her, like a powerful magician. But then I didn't know this. We simply settled down on the spacious upper deck of the Cantius. From Fort de France to Rodney Bay in St. Lucia is about 80 kilometers, and we covered this distance in 3 hours. Their estate was amazing. We were greeted by a Creole driver who never stopped talking, speaking in a mixture of French and English, and drove us in a 1953 Plymouth that looked like it had just come off the assembly line. The estate itself looked to be worth at least 8 figures in value. The house and plot alone were worth a lot, plus a staff of servants who probably need to be paid several $100,000 a year. We were given a spacious room with a stunning view of the Atlantic and 2 king-size beds. Apparently, they assumed that Kelly and I would live together, and I felt uneasy. But asking for a separate bedroom seemed strange. Besides, they might have thought that I liked men, so I had to come to terms with it, which meant testing my resolve, considering how sexy Kelly was. In the evening, we all gathered for dinner on the terrace. It seemed that the Hughes Meissner family was not particularly worried about the fate of Billy, who could be accused of treason. I later learned that this was just their usual calmness, but then it worried me. Both women, Kelly and Chelsea, wore light summer dresses, a little girl in shorts and a t-shirt with the inscription "Girls Rule." Girls Rule. Meissner and I wore casual shirts and sipped brandy and Cohiba cigars. All this was brought by the maids and the butler. All around was pure greenery, manicured to perfection, followed by the blue of the Atlantic Ocean. Birds sang and insects buzzed in the air, a fairy tale after the bustle of London. I felt complete peace. I briefly noted the contrasts in the couple between Chelsea and her husband. He was 15 or 16 years older, and he clearly served as a reliable support for her, feeding her brilliant mind. It's somewhat similar to my tandem with Kelly. She is my axe blade, and I am the heavy handle. A very efficient configuration. I explained the situation with Billy Hughes. The husband nodded and said, "Everything is as usual, a setup for money or revenge, or maybe both." Chelsea looked at this with cold rage and some kind of ominous calm. It was very impressive, as if a 15-meter dragon began to grow from a little girl literally at that second. She said in an icy voice, "Do you think others are involved?" I said, "There's no way those two Bennetts could pull that off. Bennett SR is a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He, of course, can put all this into action, but he is too prominent a figure in the command structure to personally deal with such matters. If he did all sorts of dark things, people around would immediately notice it." Chelsea said coldly, "Maybe they know." I looked at her in bewilderment. She casually explained, "People talk. That's what I'm counting on. I assume Bennett SR has his own team." I replied, "Of course, they have everything organized like any other military organization, from J1 to J8. Simply put, hundreds of people in a variety of positions." Chelsea nodded. "Great. This is exactly what I was hoping for." Somewhere, someone blurted out something unnecessary. "All we need to do is overhear what they said." I said, "There's no doubt about it. People in these offices gossip more than teenagers at a school disco. But all this happened months or even years ago. How will we hear what has already been said long ago?" Chelsea snapped ominously, "Let's go to my war room. Maybe I can dig something up." She was now in complete control of the situation. It was obvious that this fragile-looking woman becomes a completely different person when her blood boils. Her war room was lined wall to wall with monitors. In front of them was a semicircular table with several workstations and a large chair in the center. Chelsea sat down, quickly typed something on her keyboard, and continued in a conversational tone, saying, "There is not a single phone call within the Beltway that is not recorded and stored in the Bumble Hive in Utah." I had no idea what she was talking about. Chelsea continued, "This is the NSA mass data storage. Its storage volume is so large that a numerical designation has not yet been invented for it. All mass communications records from all major cities in the United States are flocked there and stored there." She smiled conspiratorially. "I worked there as an intern for a couple of weeks when I was, shall we say, in my wilder youth, before I met Tommy. You could say she laid the foundation for the future. They will never find the back door that I left." I wasn't sure what scared me more, the fact that the US government was intercepting and storing all communications, from business conversations to phone sex, or the fact that this beautiful little woman could easily hack into them. She grinned and said mockingly, "Bluffdale, Utah is the epicenter of polygamy in the United States. I just love watching fundamentalist polygamists and federal intelligence agencies try to share one small dusty town. It's just right to make a movie based on it." Chelsea turned to me and said, "I have an optimized, super fast compression algorithm that works like the old carnivore. It extracts the meat from the data, but it needs keywords. Come on, list who exactly to include in the search and what exactly we are looking for. Then we will clarify the criteria when the first results appear." I listed all the possible participants, from prime suspects like the Bennetts to low-level riffraff like McCarthy. At the same time, I included the family of this corrupt wife on the list. It was more difficult with keywords because the more criteria, the longer the processing takes. We both knew that the answer was definitely somewhere in those giant data sets. But to find it, it was necessary to sift through exabytes of information. Luckily, my little friend had a botnet of 50 million computers. This meant that she had more computing power at her fingertips than the entire NSA. The Red Dragon, to be sure, was truly a mighty beast. Chelsea entered the required names and keywords. We decided to start by searching for the words Iran, Bennett, Hughes, and Esfahan. If we don't find anything, we'll expand the search. But it was wiser to immediately hit the main targets. After all, if these two are the main persons involved, then their names should definitely appear in the records. Turning to me, Chelsea said cheerfully, "This will take time, so go find us something for lunch in the meantime." I have not yet had time to recover from what I saw. Much of our inner confidence in protecting our privacy is built on the awareness that all our dirty secrets are lost among the general information chaos. And now I realize that all communications in the United States voice and otherwise are recorded and searchable. This means that, if desired, the right people can extract the most intimate information from anyone's life in a split second. Which means there is no real privacy, no matter what Fourth Amendment rights you imagine. And here the old question of juvenile arises: quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who will watch the spies? I needed to talk to Kelly about yesterday, so I suggested that the two of us go to lunch at the Naked Fisherman restaurant on the beach at Cliff at Cap. This seemed like a good place to settle our relationship with her. On the way, I told her about Chelsea's trick, how she was going to poke around in secret government bases 4,000 miles away. I said, "Chelsea Hughes has such incredible power that I have doubts. You know, they say that power corrupts. The only thing missing from the image of a Bond villain is a white Persian cat." Kelly looked at me with tenderness and said, "For this, she has Tommy, her beloved. He is in charge of this couple. He is her stabilizer, the part of the couple that provides stability and meaning. Chelsea understands this and would be rudderless without him. That's why they love each other so much." I was about to answer something, but Kelly caught me looking at me with her incredible emerald eyes and said dryly, "I'll shoot you if you start to spread pink snot here now. I love you all body and soul. We complement each other just like the Hughes Masoners, and that will never change. You are mine forever. Get used to it." Then she became serious. "I know you got burned by Pia, but nothing changes between us. It's just that now we can sometimes have fun entertainment at night, or when it dawns on us somewhere else. But the rest of our lives remain the same." I opened my mouth to object, and Kelly immediately reached with her right hand behind her back to where her beretta lay in her holster. "SHHH," she said. "I admit that I was stupid in getting Tedesco's DNA. It was truly irresponsible and short-sighted." She really looked remorseful. "Tedesco was just a mission object for me. I didn't even suspect that you were so attached to me and that my sleeping with him could hurt you. All I knew was that I was madly devoted to you and would do everything to make you happy. You see, for me the fact that Pia's murder still torments you was stronger than any thoughts of jealousy. I just didn't think everything through." Then she became absolutely serious. "But now that I know how you feel, remember, since I made a promise, I will keep it. I know our rules, and I would rather die than break them." And then she added with a sly smile, "I am yours until death. Do you want to have a ceremony? Please, but it won't change anything. I will still be yours until you say enough." Everything was very clear. I understood that she was not joking. We were together long enough for me to read her condition by the slightest nuances. She smiled broadly. "So, we have an agreement? Or maybe I'll still have to shoot you, because no other woman will get you anymore." I thought, this is a woman. What a wonderful life partner. I raised my hands in mock surrender, smiled, and said, "Don't shoot, baby. I accept your terms." I thought that the whole mess was caused by Bennett Jr.'s primitive desire to take revenge on Bill Hughes for ruining his career. But it turned out that Hughes was nothing more than an additional victim. The conspiracy turned out to be much more cunning and crazier. How did I know this? I listened verbatim to all the conversations in which it was planned. Ironically, it was the US government's global surveillance system that gave us the opportunity to eavesdrop. It would be more correct to say the very approach of, we record everyone, we store everything, and simple inattention to one's own vulnerabilities. To get caught in such a network, you need to be either incredibly incompetent or overly confident. But in fact, this is a common thing in Washington. The right hand does not know what the left is doing. Various intelligence agencies collected the necessary evidence as part of their fight against terrorism and sent it to the Bumble Hive for storage, since the state loves to store mountains of information. Chelsea was able to sneak her backdoor into the system because the NSA, while geniuses at external cybersecurity, is not very strong at protecting itself from its own employees. Living proof is the story of Edward Snowden. Finding a needle in an exabyte haystack required colossal computing power. And then the Red Dragon's army of 50 million zombie computers came to the rescue. These zombified machines are clear proof of why you should not click on unknown links. This is how you become part of a botnet. The power of the Red Dragon botnet made this tiny beauty one of the most dangerous people in the world. From her cozy home in a country with a difficult extradition procedure, she could bring the largest corporations or entire states to their knees. Any computerized system anywhere in the world, from infrastructure to military complexes, could be disabled. As for the revealed conspiracy, it turned out to be a local, inverted version of the Fat Leonard scam, but it unfolded not in Singapore, but at a naval base in Bahrain. NSA Bahrain's Naval Support Activity. Bahrain is home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet and U.S. Naval Forces Central Command. It is from there that all major naval operations in the Persian Gulf are conducted. There are many contractors working there, serving a huge group of the U.S. Navy, and along with this, billions of dollars are circulating. Naturally, contractors compete for the fat pieces of contracts, reaching into the trough, trying to grab as much as possible. Needless to say, Bennett Jr. was one of those contractors. He made so much money from this feed that he more than repaid all the losses from the divorce and earned more than that. The essence of the deal was simple. Bennett had authoritative connections at the top, even if his father was not directly involved in the scheme. Any supply officer, admiral, or ship commander knew the name Bennett. So everyone willingly agreed to Bennett Jr.'s offer when he slipped them expensive watches, boxes of luxury cigars, and girls for $1,000 a night. The only thing he asked in return was a little information about the courses and missions of the ships in the Gulf. According to him, this will help it better serve the needs of the Navy and beat the competition. At the same time, he could even ask captains to shift the arrival schedule of ships at a time and place convenient for him in order to have a head start over other contractors. It seems to be a business-as-usual approach. Morgue, morgue, nod, nod. However, all this operational information was classified, and this is no coincidence. Knowing about the plans of the Navy, any hostile player in the region could prepare, create provocations, and even arrange dangerous incidents. For those captains and admirals who took bribes, this threatened the collapse of their careers and potential tribunals. The problem is that Bennett Jr. didn't even bother to encrypt his scheme in any way. Everyone who lived in this ancient crossroads of civilizations knew about his bribes and bribes. Iran is only 400 miles by sea across the bay. Of course, Tehran perceives the presence of the U.S. fleet in the Gulf as a direct threat or even an act of war, and therefore is looking for ways to harm us ships as much as possible. For Iranian intelligence Fajr, information about the courses and tasks of American ships is a treasure, and they sent in their best agent to get this data. The United States specializes in high technology to obtain information about its business, diplomacy, and political goals. Russia prefers old proven methods, sex. They know that almost any man will succumb sooner or later if you offer him the right bait. Thus, in Russia, many influential people who came there became the heroes of secret videos filmed with hidden cameras in hotel rooms. This gave the intelligence services a serious trump card for blackmail. In this case, the FSB lent its elite spy, Ekaterina Semenova, to the Iranians. She was 26. Her appearance was literally designed for the purpose of seduction. Appropriate plastic surgery made her appearance truly ideal. Years of training in the art of seduction and sexual techniques were no less difficult than special forces training. Bennett, being an eternal womanizer, simply did not understand who he was dealing with. His pride suggested that such a luxurious beauty was prey just for him. He never thought that she might not have appreciated his incredible charms and fat wallet, but was carrying out a task. For him, this was a personal triumph and confirmation of his own importance. By the time Katya Semenova took him into circulation, Bennett was already actually engaged in treason. He boastfully shared secret information with her to impress. Like, what's wrong with that if it's just another mistress? Of course, this mistress regularly transmitted data to her curators from Vaja. Therefore, the Revolutionary Guard of Iran received in advance all the information about the movements of American ships. US patrols with enviable regularity began to encounter maneuvers of high-speed boats or targeted random actions of commercial vessels crossing their path. These actions of the Iranians seemed so accurate that employees of the National Naval Intelligence Center (NMIC) began to suspect that someone was leaking secrets to them. Realizing that the case concerned Iran, the Navy Command transferred the investigation to the Naval Investigative Agency (NCIS). When NCIS Special Agent Anthony Donazzo showed up at Bennett's office for a simple check-in, Bennett was terrified. He realized that sooner or later the tracks could lead to him. But of course, he didn't confess anything to anyone, and he called Dad. My father didn't like it, but he still decided to help. Bennett SR himself was not distinguished by holiness for major players in Washington. Morality and ethics have long become tools that can be interpreted in any way. But a son is a son, and he promised to cover for him one last time. He called his fixer Captain Bob Roberts. He had to cover his tracks. Captain Roberts, the owner of 2 names and 1 surname, was fanatically devoted to his boss, who gave him an undeservedly high position. His job on the Joint Chiefs of Staff consisted of quiet solutions to such problems. Through his connections in shadowy intelligence circles, he learned that the NCIS investigation was focused on Iranian espionage. This means they need a scapegoat, an officer with access to the necessary data and connections to Iran. And since Roberts, on the instructions of Bennett SR, already knew who the real culprit was, he could only frame someone else. Roberts instructed the Office of Personnel Management, together with the CIA, to compile a list of sailors associated with the Iranian direction and with access to classified information of the Fifth Fleet. In first place was Commander William Hughes. Both Bennetts took it as a godsend. William Hughes was transferred to the Nimitz Intelligence Center in Suitland after his divorce. His ability to systematize information was useful for analytical work. It was so useful that he was soon appointed officer curator for Iran at the US Embassy in London, where he met Samreen Esfahan, who, alas, had serious connections with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This lead was perfect for Roberts. Roberts slowly directed suspicions in the right direction, keeping both the CIA and the Pentagon informed about the matter. The puzzle came together into a complete picture against Hughes. Lieutenant General Reynolds took over, whom Roberts considered a rather limited person, but understood that he would obediently follow the evidence slipped in without asking unnecessary questions. Intelligence agencies went after a decoy target. Bennett SR, full of his own sins, once again educated his son, saying that this was the last time he would help, but on the whole he considered the issue resolved. No one even imagined that all their telephone conversations would be intercepted, recorded, and stored. And even if they did not believe that someone from the outside would be able to decipher and compare them. After all, in order to get to the bottom of the truth, you need to suspect a substitution. You need to find exactly the person who is able to penetrate the data warehouse and who has enough power to sort through huge amounts of information. The likelihood of such a perfect combination was almost zero, so everyone calmed down. So Billy Hughes and I sat on one side of a long mahogany table in the briefing room of the Senate Armed Services Committee office. A woman sat next to us, perhaps the hottest 60-year-old I've ever seen in my life. It was immediately clear who gave Chelsea such an appearance and luxurious figure. Chelsea's mother, Mattie Hughes, looked about 40, although she was well over 60. She had dark brown hair, huge intelligent eyes, a slightly mocking sensual mouth, and a luxurious body. But it was not only about external data. Mattie Hughes was, like her daughter, a real natural hurricane, exuding sexual energy. At the same time, her inner core was unbending. and at the moment she was furiously indignant. It's hard to blame her, she just found out that the US government wanted to charge her beloved son with treason. Sitting opposite us was the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, a senator from Maryland and close friend of Maddie Hughes. Next to him is the Minister of Defense. Thus, both the legislative and executive powers were represented at the very top. People like Maddie Hughes get meetings with the greats of this world with one phone call. Politicians, being practical ones, value friendship with philanthropists. After all, they can send substantial money either to your election campaign or to the campaign of your opponent. It all depends on how satisfied they are with you. Both high-profile guests wanted Maddie to be satisfied. They looked a little stunned because Maddie had just played a 15-minute compilation of telephone conversations in which the voices of all the people involved confirmed their involvement in the frame-up of her son. Each suspect sounded like they'd been caught over a dead body with a smoking gun, screaming, "I did it." The political weight of these recordings was enormous. We spent several days putting them together and editing them to fit them into a short format. After all, politicians have limited attention spans. And Maddie clearly showed what a storm she can create for the Ministry of Defense. Everyone in the room understood this. The Minister of Defense is not a timid person, accustomed to fighting in political battles. But he still asked the necessary question, "Where did you get this? And how can this be confirmed?" Maddie laughed in his face. "We both know this is a Bluffdale hack. Accordingly, I cannot name the source. But rest assured, the materials are genuine, and we have hours of such recordings." Then she reclined back in her chair in a relaxed position. I couldn't help but notice that her large breasts barely sagged under their own weight. "Don't judge me, all men are guilty of this," Maddie continued in an innocent tone. "Basically, I could give it all to CNN and the Washington Post. They have enough resources to conduct an investigation." The senator and the Secretary of Defense smiled. Players know when they are dealing with an equal player. The minister asked, "What would it take for this to sink into oblivion forever?" Maddie put on a serious face. "But this is a blatant abuse of power. Don't our citizens deserve to know the truth?" In response, everyone at the table laughed. No one doubted Maddie Hughes' amazing sense of humor. So the deal was done. Billy Hughes was quietly cleared of all suspicions of treason. Based on the materials, a huge scandal opened up, because of which the Navy carried out mass dismissals and reductions in ranks. Journalists puzzled over what was happening in the Pentagon, but regularly wrote about the sharply increased number of resignations and demonization of admirals. By that time, 4 admirals, 16 captains, and 1 member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had already been targeted, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. The main hero of the whole story, Bennett Jr., received his sentence anyway. He was not such a big player that he needed to protect himself, and all the evidence pointed to him. His father, Bennett Sr., eventually also got burned and was forced to retire. I kept my pension only because I agreed to keep my mouth shut. McCarthy, who had first tasted power, now saw for himself what happens when the state decides to bury you. He and his entire department simply jumped off the ship. It was then difficult for them to find any equivalent work. Reynolds was deducted 1 star, and he retired with the rank of Major General, although he was aiming for a higher rank. For the careerist, this, of course, was a particularly painful blow. Bennett Jr. was never held accountable for treason. After all, the records were obtained illegally. But on charges of bribery and conspiracy to commit fraud, he was imprisoned for a long time. To soften his fate, he made a deal with the investigation and sang like a little dove. Thanks to his testimony, charges were brought against a number of other officers. Bennett is serving his 7-year sentence at FPC Alderson, although, perhaps, for his own safety, it would be better to be in the Supermax. Many of those he reported on probably want to talk with him. Susie was not subject to any sanctions. She already paid when she lost her husband because of her own infidelity. She never stopped cheating in subsequent marriages. Her beauty by that time began to fade, and as a result, she remained a lonely and unhappy woman with a bad reputation. At the same time, Billy Hughes was promoted to captain, but he became completely disillusioned with the Navy and the public service in general. Billy was smart and spent a long time analyzing what happened to him. He realized that while he was decent and honest, he projected the same principles onto those around him and naively believed that everyone would behave honestly. This is how he was raised from childhood. This made him a true officer and gentleman, but at the same time it was a weak point that allowed him to trust his wife Susie. We made vows to each other. Now he realized how infantile that approach was. He decided that he would live among people for whom his principles had the same value. And alas, the military environment and the state did not fit this definition. But in his personal life, he was finally lucky he met Samran Esfahan. She is no less beautiful than Susie, but much smarter. She recognized her strengths and weaknesses and lived with a sincere desire to do what is right and conscientious. This was enough for them to fit each other perfectly. Their children, of course, turned out to be not only beautiful, but also raised in the image and likeness of their parents. After the wedding, they both went to work for Aunt Millie as volunteers, since they already had money. The Pentagon unexpectedly awarded Billy a pension for all 30 years of service, as if he had served until the end of his career. None of them knew what the true reason for such generosity was, and it's better that they didn't guess. It would be unpleasant for them to realize such cynical situations. They both continued to believe in good things. They found their calling in the organization Doctors Without Borders. Billy's organizational skills and Samreen's ability to get along with people became invaluable in the backward parts of the world, where they brought help and a little more kindness. This brought them colossal spiritual returns and the feeling that they had found in life exactly what they were striving for. What about Billy's sister, Chelsea? She still lives in luxury and peace in St. Lucia. But a new community of super hackers called Red Dragon Girls is slowly growing on the darknet. It's funny that they mainly attack teen gossip and chat sites. Apparently, Chelsea or someone from her circle there is warming up on smaller prey. As for Kelly and me, nothing has changed for us. She is still the same feisty, sharp-tongued girl. We do the best for our clients and live happily in our cozy apartment at the Navy Pier. Yes, we still formalized the relationship, although it turned out casually during a lunch break. And now we are thinking about children. Looking at her fighting spirit and my penchant for harsh methods, there is a risk that our child will become the Antichrist, but we are willing to take the risk. I was a loner for many years and still haven't gotten used to the fact that I'm no longer alone. But it's so great to feel that there is someone in this world who, without hesitation, is ready to sacrifice himself for you. And I hope that she understands that I am ready to do the same for her. Oh yeah, and as for the sex, it's still great. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.